So we're back to LA Fishguys here with Jeff Macare at Reef Dynamics. So tell us, Jeff, how does a protein skimmer, how does the water and the air move or pass through this skimmer? We know how you pump the air in there, but how does that air and water get out of the protein skimmer?
Well, it's a magic. It's an illusion. Well, basically, once the pump's injected the water into the protein skimmer, the reaction chamber, because we talked about co-current and countercurrent earlier. Countercurrent certainly is the best design because it increases contact time.
Where the water is working against the direction that the air bubbles are going.
Exactly. So the bubbles are fighting against the water, water is fighting against the bubbles, and so that makes them, that forces them to spend more time together, which is what we want, because we want those bubbles saturated with organics, and the water stripped from organic, fractionated from organic. So in our design, for example, the water leaves through the bottom of the skimmer, which is very common for countercurrent design, and it comes up out this elbow here. You can see that out this elbow up to this T. Now what we've done is the way we control the water level in the skimmer is with this pipe. Now this pipe has a wedge shape cut on it. See that? Okay. And so when we put this wedge in, we'll put the wedge in the open position, right? Open facing there. See how low the water in the skimmer is? It's like down here at the transition between the body. But as I turn this and bring that wedge closer to the outlet side, which is here, the water in the skimmer starts to rise. See?
Because you're restricting the amount of water that can exit the protein skimmer.
Well, I'm actually not restricting the amount of water. I'm restricting the height, the point at which the water leaves. So basically, as this backs it up in there, it's making it so it's harder for the water to leave. So and then in our design, our earlier skimmers had what was called a telescoping outlet assembly, which is a pipe within a pipe that you kind of pull up and down with a filter sponge on the outside.
It had the round sponge that the water would billow out of the top of.
Right. And as long as you keep the sponge clean, it works pretty well. It acts as some diffusion and helps minimize the bubbles leaving. But with the design of the INS series, we wanted to add a couple other cool features. The silencer, which is great because if I take this tube off here, I don't know if you can hear that. That's what it sounds like. So you'll hear the air pump pulling all that air in, and it makes a lot more noise. So we put this on here, right? And
so that airline that you're playing with, that's the airline that sucks the air into the venturi.
Absolutely, that's absolutely right.
Okay. And now instead of it just sucking straight from the air in the room, you've attached it somehow to
this cap, which is called a silencer. There's an intake on the top, and this pipe extends down into the chamber, and then the water comes from here, the rest of it. And so it's not a direct connection, and it diffuses it inside. This also acts as a vent, so that we can have the water come out of another T and drain down. Because if I had, for example, an elbow here, and this was underwater, it would create a vacuum and would cause water to fluctuate inside the reactor. And unfortunately, there's a lot of skimmers out now that have that design, and people either have to drill a hole in the top, or they have to have the outlet above the water level, because it won't. At that point, it'll make it so that it won't cause that fluctuation. But we bypassed all that by using this, and this is also nice because I can adjust this whole thing. I can put it right up against the body, right? Or if my sump's a little weird, I can put it all the way over here. To change the footprint of the skimmer. So we have a lot of flexibility in that, and then it also allows you to use like a little filter sock on the outlet.
I noticed the sock, and the sock typically is for trapping out fine particles.
Right, but in our case, we're using it to trap bubbles.
One of
the things that happened, if you remember, when you add more junk to the system and the skimmer creates more bubbles, you're going to get more small bubbles created, and they're going to eventually find their way out of the outlet. It's invariable. And that's another one of the more common calls we get is, my skimmer's producing too many bubbles, and my tank's full of bubbles. All they really need to do is put a filter sock on it. And what they need to do is they need to probably add some activated carbon to the system, because most likely what's happening is there's either an overabundance of organics, meaning the system is really saturated, and the skimmer's probably brand new and actually working for the first time, or they've introduced something to the aquarium that's a surfactant. Like a lot of the water conditioners like Amquel or Novaqua, they have coagulants in them or surfactants, and they're just going to make the skimmer go crazy. Polyfilter has a residue that will make the skimmer do that for a little while. These filter socks sometimes have that sort of a residue from fabrication. So if you ever see your skimmer acting like that, the best thing to do is to adjust your skimmer down if you can, and just add some carbon, maybe like a half a pound per 50 gallons of water. And pretty quickly you'll see the skimmer settle down, because it's removing those surfactant
tell me, there are two things I've seen. One I've experienced and one I hear about all the time. You hear about the protein skimmer needs to break in.
Right.
What does that mean? Because usually you find a brand new skimmer will really foam a whole lot. It'll also allow a lot of small bubbles to exit the skimmer. And the common statement is, oh, that protein skimmer is breaking in. What's actually happening there?
Well, when the skimmer is brand new, especially when it comes from the factory, there may be residue from fabrication. For example, I mean, even though we use filters, we use compressed air here to clear out all the junk, shards of plastic and from routing and sanding and all that kind of stuff. And we also wipe out the skimmers, but invariably there may be some residue from fabrication.
Okay.
And when you first set the skimmer up, the best thing to do, honestly, is to take the whole skimmer, put it in a Rubbermaid bucket, and run it with some vinegar and water.
Oh.
Maybe 2 parts water to 1 part vinegar.
Okay.
And just let the whole thing overflow and just let that vinegar water get through and soak everything.
Oh.
And that will remove the residue.
Okay.
And then dry it out thoroughly, put it in. And then the next step of it, what we call seasoning a skimmer, or the breaking in part, is really basically what's happening is in here on the neck and also on the body, a thin film of bacteria develops.
Oh.
And that basically allows the bubbles to move smoothly through the chamber without adhering to the side.
Oh.
Okay? And that happens, I mean, in an established system, it happens pretty quickly. In a new aquarium, it takes a lot longer because there isn't such an abundance of organics and bacteria in the system.
Okay.
So it could take 2 days, it could take 2 weeks.
Okay.
But that's basically what the break-in is. And a little trick that I've learned over the years is if you take a little Skimate from your friend's tank and just kind of rub the inside of the neck with it and seed the skimmer, kind of like you do with, remember when we had under-gravel filters?
Yes.
You take a little bit of sand from your buddy's tank and drop it in your tank, and that would seed the system.
Right.
That Skimate will help seed the skimmer too. And you can just wipe it in the body and the neck, and it'll just skim it right out, and that'll help that kind of get going.
Interesting. The other thing that I've seen and experienced it a few times myself is when a customer feeds the tank, certain foods seem to make the protein skimmer go a little crazy, and you do get an abundance of small little air bubbles exiting the skimmer. Within 30 minutes, maybe an hour, that settles down. Any thoughts as to what's happening there?
Well, yeah, I mean, actually there's two phenomena. One is the skimmer goes crazy, or two, the skimmer stops running at all. And generally the latter is a reaction to oil, and it's usually from your hand.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, so you stick your hand in the tank, you've had lotion, you just forgot about it, you drop it in, boom, the skimmer's dead. I mean, it just stops.
Okay.
And then it takes a while for the oil to get filtered out. The other reaction, which is that over skimming action, is kind of like what we talked about earlier. A lot of food has binders in it.
Okay.
And gel binders, coagulants, or emulsifiers. And they're going to make the skimmer go crazy. And again, it just adjust it down. I mean, a lot of there's some planktons and some krills and mysis, yeah. And a lot of that's probably the gelatin that they add to it to kind of help that whole thing kind of stabilize in a frozen block format. It's not just water.
Okay.
Because if it was water, it would defrost really quickly.
Okay.
So, but that's all it is. It's just a reaction to something that's happening in the water. Here's a super important tip, and that is, if you own a protein skimmer, you need to own an airflow meter. And here's why. An airflow meter is the only device that allows you to know whether your skimmer is working properly or not. And an airflow device, and I'll show you one, I'll put it on the skimmer, it tells you how much air the pump is pulling in. So if you have a brand new skimmer, say like this one for example, and we'll take our trusty airflow meter. This is a Dwyer RMA 22. If we pop it on the side here, clamp it on, and I take this tube off, right? And move the skimmer over here. And I attach it to the inlet. There's a little ball that starts to dance. See that little ball?
Okay.
That ball is dancing at around 15 to 16 liters per minute.
Okay.
So that tells me how much air is going into the skimmer.
All right.
So this is 900 liters an hour, as we talked about earlier. So if I come in one day and I see this,
it's way down.
It's way down. That means that something's wrong with the pump.
Okay.
Right?
Okay.
Something's clogging it. The venturi's clogged. The tubing's clogged. It's kinked. Something's not right. I can go through and troubleshoot it. But if I come in and something's not working right, but this is working good, I know that it's not the pump.
Okay.
I know that it's probably the skimmer reacting to something in the water.
Uh-huh.
So it's a critical piece of equipment. They're not cheap, but what in the hobby is.
Right. Where does someone get something like this, and what's it called again?
It's called an airflow meter. We have them on our website
Okay.
at reefdynamics.com.
Okay.
Just go to the airflow meters under parts and accessories, and we have two different models. One is 1 to 10 liters per minute, and one is 0 to 25 liters per minute.
Okay.
And that should cover the basis for most people, using protein skimmers for hobbyists.
Wow. Okay.
But I mean, every service guy should have one too.
Right.
Every time you go out to the tank to service, you pop it on real quick. Boom, you'll know in 2 seconds if the pump's working right.
Okay. Yes.
And if not, then you got a problem. You got to troubleshoot it. So, and another important tip here is, especially on protein skimmers, and this also goes for calcium reactors, you should definitely take the pump off the skimmer at least quarterly. That means every 2 to 3 months.
Right.
And run the pump in vinegar and water. Because what that does is it descales the motor. In reef tanks, especially where people are adding calcium and bicarbonates and stuff, especially if they're keeping unnatural levels of those compounds or minerals, they're going to be a lot of precipitation.
Okay.
And that precipitation deposits on the ceramic shaft that we talked about before and the ceramic bearing. So imagine you have your ceramic shaft spinning on your bearing, but there's deposits on them. It's going to retard, it's going to restrict that. It's going to basically cause friction.
Right.
And as that slows down, the motor, like we talked about the coils, they're still running at 3,500 or 3,600 RPM, right?
Sure.
Boogieing right along, but that rotor's saying, hey, I can't move.
Right.
So what ends up happening? Back pressure. The motor starts to overheat.
Right.
The rotor starts to expand. It can explode, impale, not like blow up, explode, but basically crack and start to come apart. And all the time people call me up and say, hey, my skimmer pump's dead. And I say, well, can you remove the impeller? No, it's stuck in there. That's because they let the thing overheat.
Right.
And when was the last time you cleaned the pump? Oh, you have to clean it. So, and it's a common mistake.
Sure.
On our website, we do, under our information section, we have an FAQ that's pump service. How do I service my pump, skimmer pump?
Right.
And it's a step-by-step photographic guide of how you take it apart. It shows all those parts we discussed, the impeller assembly, but it's the most important thing is that vinegar and water bath.
Okay.
And if you're using a calcium reactor, you need to do that same service to the calcium reactor pump too.
Sure.
Because it's got the same components inside.
Sure.
And if you're using a calcium reactor and or caulk washer or other supplements, you may want to bump that service interval up to at least every 2 months.
Okay.
Just to make sure you get long life. Because at the end of the day, it's not a cheap hobby.
Sure.
And you want to make your equipment last.
Right.
And that's how you do it. I mean, I have people, they'll ask me, well, how long are these pumps supposed to last? I said, well, 5 or 6 years. I've had people call me, with the skimmers I used to make, the other company I worked with, pumps 9-10 years old.
Wow.
But that's because those people maintain them.
Okay.
So that's just a little maintenance tip between the airflow meter and descaling the motor. And you can also take the whole skimmer once a year, drop it into a tub, and use the vinegar and water bath and clean it so it's brand new, because cleanliness is next to godliness.
So
make your stuff last.
You touched on maintenance a little bit, like in particular the amount of air coming through there. Typically, what would be some of the maintenance items that you would want to perform on a regular basis, say weekly, on a protein skimmer?
Well, actually, that leads into a good point in that a lot of customers ask why we don't put drains on the cup for our protein skimmers.
Okay.
And it's a philosophical reason, and that is because I want you to clean the cup. If I put a drain on there, you're going to have it go to some bucket, which may overflow all over your floor sometime, which wouldn't be so nice. But mostly, you're not going to clean it.
Right.
Because you don't have to.
Okay.
Well, the problem is that your skimming efficiency is dramatically affected by buildup inside the neck. And I can't tell you how many people send me photos of their skimmer, and it's black in here.
Oh.
And it's like, a quarter of an inch thick sludge.
Sure.
That's not working.
Okay.
Because that sludge is wet, it's oily, and all the bubbles are just falling right back into the skimmer.
Okay.
You clean all that out, boom, the skimmer's working again.
So cleaning of the inside of the cup is very important.
Very important.
Okay.
You want to clean it with lukewarm water, no soap ever in the aquarium. And then here's my little side tip: is dry it. Take a paper towel or a towel and dry that neck really, really dry, because that makes a nice surface for the bubbles to attach to right away, and you'll find your skimmer will jump right back into action.
Interesting.
So for me, if the skimmer's properly sized and chugging out the junk, at least probably 2 times a week, maybe even 3 times a week, get that cup off, clean it thoroughly. And also, you want to clean this section here too, the transition. Get a little filter sponge in there and clean this section here, because this is where that water and the bubbles are transitioning.
Sure.
And you want to keep that clean, and even the body too. We have a cool little brush I'll show you.
And you've spent money buying a protein skimmer with a fancy or a unique neck design that allows for that smooth transition. It only makes sense that you want to clean it to enhance or maintain the idea behind that design.
Absolutely. I mean, this is a little brush we sell. It's an oxo brush. It's just a real soft bristle, so it won't scratch the acrylic. But if it's right perfectly in here, and you can scrub this inside, get that clean.
Okay.
Scrub the neck as well.
Okay.
Right? And then you can also get in and just dump this back in and have more skimming fun.
There we go.
You can also get in here and clean this.
Okay.
See, and the body itself too.
Oh, yeah.
So get in there, keep it clean. If it's clean, it's going to work better.
Okay.
It just is. So, but maintenance tip: clean that cup on a regular basis.
There is one other area that I find quite frequently I need to address, and that is where this airline attaches to the nipple or inlet of that venturi valve.
Right. Well, because there's an interface between air and water there, you're going to get the buildup of salt crystals,
right?
Minerals,
right?
And mostly calcium carbonate, like we talked about earlier.
Okay.
And running that pump in vinegar and water descales that.
Okay.
Another cool tip you can do, which I do on a weekly basis, is I'll take the airline tube off. I'll show you. I'll take the airline tube off, and I'll take a little cup with some RO water, preferably. And you can make it a little warm. And what I do is I just dip the tube in the cup.
So it sucks the water out of the cup into the airline tube, which I assume is sucking it down or passing it through that little venturi valve.
Exactly, and that flushes the venturi apparatus of salt buildup. So if you do that once a week, you'll see a big difference. And again, this is something you can monitor. For example, if I came in and looked at my airflow meter, and it was 10 or 12,
right?
I'd go, okay, well let's pop it in
Something's
there,
wrong on the suction
pop it
end of
back on, and boom, there it's back at 15 again.
Right,
so we know what the
right.
problem was. The venturi was clogged.
A lot of my service accounts, I've actually got a little paper clip somewhere in the cabinet. I can take that airline off, stick that little paper clip down into that little venturi nipple, and poke some of the salt that's built up in there out of there.
Yeah, my only caution with that is if the paper clip scrapes the inside of the plastic, it could create burrs, which will make it so that more stuff deposits.
Okay.
So what I would look for is a pipette brush.
Oh, okay.
And you can choose a little pipette brush and get into the nipple of that venturi. Usually they're fairly small, but if you get a small enough brush, you can get in there and scrub it through. But honestly, the warm water does the trick. Because it rinses all that out.
Okay. Okay. Well, that was
we're talking weekly.
Sure.
Every week. You know, feed the fish, clean the skimmer.
Right.
You know, and if you do that, stay on top of those things, the skimmer will work optimally all the time, and you're going to get the most enjoyment out of it. And your fish, of course, and your corals are going to get the best out of it.
Wow. Well, Jeff, thank you very much.
My pleasure.
Be sure to come on back for the final part. That's part 7 of LA Fishguys, the protein skimmer episode, as Jeff shares with us not only some protein skimmer, but aquarium tips.